Picture this. A decades-old enigma suddenly brought to light by, well, the chaos of World War II on a Liverpool bomb site.
Quite a scene.
Today, we're plunging into the strange and frankly unsettling case of the body in the cylinder, unearthed back in 1945.
Yeah.
Imagine finding human remains inside this partially sealed steel cylinder on just a derelict plot of land.
And the first estimates suggested the body had been there for, what, 60 years?
Exactly. 60 years prior. It's the kind of discovery that just, sparks endless questions.
Absolutely. It's like a forgotten story just abruptly resurfacing.
Yeah.
A bizarre artifact from a bygone era found amidst the destruction of a more recent conflict.
Right.
And what really grips you, I think, is that while they did come up with a potential identity, the core mystery is still there.
How did this person die?
Exactly.
Oh.
How did they meet their end, and what on earth led them to be sealed inside that cylinder?
Yeah, that's the kicker. So for this deep dive, we're using excerpts from the Wikipedia article on the body in the cylinder.
Good source for the key facts.
And our mission really is to go beyond just the basic facts of this incredibly unusual find and, well, try to unravel some of those lingering threads.
Sounds good. Where do we start? The cylinder itself.
Okay, so where did this rather peculiar container actually originate?
Right, so the cylinder itself first popped up in the summer of 1943. American soldiers were busy with the grim task of clearing away debris left by the Blitz.
Whereabouts was this?
Behind the Methodist Church on Boundary Street East in Liverpool.
So a post-Blitz cleanup operation uncovering secrets from a much earlier time. How exactly did they stumble across this thing?
It was actually an American bulldozer. While moving rubble that unearthed the cylinder.
Okay.
They noted one end was capped with a steel plate, bolted shut. The other end was open.
But it didn't stay wide open for long, did it? I read something about the bulldozer.
No, that's right. The bulldozer, just in doing its work, accidentally crushed the open end.
Oh.
Yeah, almost crimped it shut, basically. It left only this tiny aperture about 4 inches across.
4 inches. Barely anything.
Hardly. Then building contractors moved the cylinder out of the immediate debris field and just laid it horizontally on the ground.
So for 2 whole years, this cylinder just lay there. It's almost surreal to think of it just being part of the landscape.
It is strange, isn't it? And for quite a while, it seemed to just became this unremarkable object. A local guy, Norman Garner, he recalled seeing people actually using it as a seat.
No way.
Yes, and even children playing with it, incorporating it into their games. Imagine that a future crime scene used as, like, playground equipment.
Kids really do find adventure anywhere, don't they? So how did it go from being a discarded bit of metal to, well, the discovery of the body?
Well, about 2 weeks before the remains were finally found, some kids were seen rolling the cylinder.
Rolling it.
Yeah. They moved it from a patch of wasteland in Great Homer Street to a nearby street, Claudia Street.
Okay.
It seems that this movement, this closer interaction, must have sparked their curiosity, or maybe shifted something inside. Anyway, it led to the unsettling discovery when they peered inside.
So just kids playing, and they accidentally reveal a secret that's decades old. What can you tell us about the cylinder itself, like the specifics?
Physically, it was pretty robust. 6 feet 9 inches long, 19 inches in diameter.
Quite big, then.
Yeah, decent size. Made of gauge 9 steel, which is fairly thick, about 0.156 inches. As we said, one end bolted, the other crushed nearly shut.
Any other details?
An interesting point is that there was no paint inside. None at all. Which led people in 1945 to think it might have been part of a ventilation shaft.
A ventilation shaft. Makes you wonder where it came from originally and how it ended up on that bomb site. Okay, so the cylinder's moved, the kids are playing, and then the grim discovery. Take us to that moment.
The key date was July 13th, 1945. 3 young boys were playing with the cylinder, rolling it around like we discussed.
Right.
When one of them peered through that small opening, that 4-inch gap, they first thought they saw a shoe.
Just a shoe.
Initially. But then, looking closer, the horrible reality hit them. It was attached to a human skeleton.
Oh, God. For kids to find that, that's deeply disturbing. What happened immediately after?
Well, naturally, the police were called straight away. Given how sealed up it was, they actually had to bring in an oxyacetylene torch to cut it open properly.
Had to cut into it.
Yeah. Once they got access, they found a complete human skeleton inside, along with several other items. The remains were then, carefully removed and taken to the mortuary for examination.
A complete skeleton. A silent witness, really, to a story nobody knew. What could the initial exam tell investigators about this person?
The remains were determined to be those of an adult male. He would have been about 6 feet tall in life,
Okay.
and the 1945 estimate put his age at death somewhere between 25 and 50. Quite a range, but understandable.
And the condition clearly showed he'd been in there a long, long time.
Oh, definitely.
Oh.
Significant period.
And the skeleton itself? Any anomalies? Clues there?
There were a couple things they noted. The left base of the skull was missing.
Missing.
Unclear from the report, just that it was absent. Also, there was a fracture near the left middle ear, but it was described as nonviolent.
Nonviolent fracture.
Yeah. And interestingly, the head and torso had actually become separated, probably just due to movement inside the cylinder over all those years.
Grim detail.
And there was still a small amount of hair attached to the skull.
Wow. The image of that. A skull missing a piece, but still with hair from a life lived so long ago. What about the position of the body inside? Did that suggest anything?
Yes, that was quite telling. The way the remains were arranged strongly suggested the man had actually entered the cylinder deliberately. Crawled in.
Crawled in. Why?
Well, the skeleton was lying down, and they found a brick, wrapped in sacking, positioned right where you'd expect a pillow to be.
A brick for a pillow.
Wrapped in sacking, yes. It very much points towards him deliberately seeking shelter, or maybe just confinement inside the cylinder.
That's bizarre.
And he was fully clothed, described as good quality clothes, typical of the later Victorian period.
Victorian. So that fits the 60-year estimate.
It does. And importantly, the clothes were lying on some sacking, but the body wasn't wrapped in it.
So he crawls in, makes a makeshift pillow, wearing his Victorian clothes. It paints a very peculiar picture, doesn't it? What about personal items? Belongings found inside? Surely they offered more leads.
They certainly did. A whole collection of items was discovered right there with the body.
Like what?
2 diaries, dated 1884 and 1885.
Diaries. Amazing. Would they read them?
Sadly, by 1945, they were mostly illegible, water damage, decay, But they did make out one entry from June 1885. It mentioned an appointment for 1 p.m. with F.C. Greedy at Conn's.
F.C. Greedy at Conn's. Intriguing. What else?
A decayed postcard was also there. The coroner actually managed to painstakingly reconstruct parts of it.
Really?
Yeah, it had a Birmingham postmark dated July 3rd, 1885, and it was addressed to a T.C. Williams from a Mr. A.E. Harris.
T.C. Williams. Okay, so that name surfaces early on. Seems connected. Anything else with him?
There was a plain handkerchief, no markings, a brooch, and perhaps the most personal item was a well-worn gold signet ring.
A signet ring?
Yeah, with a green stone that had red flecks in it. It was hallmarked London, 1859.
London, 1859. Specific.
Very. Also, a London Northwestern Railway advice note dated June 27th, 1885. 5 account sheets, 4 of them unused from T.C. Williams & Co., and a billhead receipt, also from T.C. Williams & Co., with an address on Leeds Street, Liverpool.
Wow, that's quite a haul. And the repeated mention of T.C. Williams & Co. seems really significant.
Absolutely hard to ignore.
Were there any other personal things, like money in his pockets? Valuables?
That's the interesting thing. Despite the good quality clothes and the gold ring, apparently no money or other obvious valuables were found in his pockets.
Okay, so the discoveries made, the body and these belongings are documented. What did the official investigation find out?
Well, the inquest opened on July 19th, 1945. The Liverpool coroner, a Mr. G.C. Mort, was in charge. He adjourned it initially for a month to allow for more investigation, and they quickly ruled out any link to the Blitz. That was an obvious first thought, given where the cylinder was found, but the evidence didn't support it.
Right, that makes sense, especially with the Victorian-era items pointing much earlier. What did the pathologist say?
The pathologist's exam highlighted a notable amount of moisture inside the cylinder, even though it was mostly sealed.
Moisture.
This led to 3 possible scenarios about how long the body had been there. 1, if the cylinder wasn't fully sealed, maybe about 10 years.
10 years.
But the other 2 scenarios, which seemed more likely given the condition, suggested either the cylinder was airtight or moisture got in but couldn't dry out. And those scenarios pushed the timeline back to around 1885 or 1890.
Which fits perfectly with the dates on the diaries and postcard.
Exactly. And importantly, the state of the remains indicated just normal decomposition, nothing unusual, just slowed down by the conditions inside.
So the moisture level was like a kind of forensic clock. What was the final verdict from the inquest?
On August 31st, 1945, the coroner concluded the inquest. He delivered an open verdict,
Open verdict, meaning
meaning there just wasn't enough evidence to say for sure how the man died. Cause of death unknown. But the prevailing belief, based on everything they found, was that death likely occurred around 1885.
an open verdict, a testament to the mystery still surrounding it all. But that name, T.C. Williams, kept coming up. How did they explore his potential connection?
Well, during that inquest period in August 45, Thomas Cregan Williams, who was identified as a paint and brush manufacturer with a business at 5 Leeds Street, Liverpool, he emerged as a really strong candidate.
Strong but not confirmed.
Strong but unconfirmed, correct.
Mm.
Digging deeper, they found T.C. Williams & Co. were paint, varnish, and color merchants on Tide Barn Street with their work premises in Smithfield Street, right around 1885.
Okay.
And Williams himself had lived at a couple of addresses, 29 Cambridge Road in Seaford, and later Woodville House, Abbotsford Road in Blundell's Hands.
So definitely a local businessman, active in Liverpool, right when all this seems to have happened. What else linked him?
A crucial piece of the puzzle. Thomas Cregan Williams had been declared bankrupt on March 10, 1884.
Bankrupt. Okay, that adds a motive, maybe.
That was the inquest's hypothesis,
Mm-hmm.
a plausible theory, though still speculative. Facing serious money troubles, Williams might have left home, maybe ended up hiding out, or even sleeping rough.
And maybe used the cylinder at his works premises.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perhaps sleeping in a cylinder located at his business premises on Smithfield Street. And then, somehow, the theory goes, the cylinder became sealed, perhaps accidentally, leading to death by, maybe, asphyxiation.
A really tragic possibility, if true. Rooted in financial desperation, was there any record of him actually disappearing around then?
There was. Contemporary thinking back in 1885 when he vanished leaned towards the idea that he deliberately absconded, run off to avoid his creditors.
Runner.
Yeah. Apparently, in that era, people facing bankruptcy sometimes did try to get passage on ships to escape their debts. It wasn't unheard of.
Right. What about family? Death records.
That adds another layer. Records showed his wife was eventually buried alone in Liverpool. But crucially, no death certificate or burial record for Thomas Cregan Williams could be found. Not in Liverpool, not anywhere else in England and Wales.
So he just vanished from the records after 1885.
Pretty much. It was also found he had one son, born back in 1859, but when the authorities tried to find any living relatives back in 1945, they drew a blank. Couldn't locate anyone.
So let's recap. He disappears right after bankruptcy, no death record ever found. And then decades later, all these items bearing his name and company name turn up with a body in a sealed cylinder found near where his business might have been.
It's a very compelling chain of circumstantial evidence, isn't it? Strongly pointing towards Williams.
It really is. But as you said, the lack of a definite cause of death and that persistent question of how the cylinder got sealed, those are big gaps.
Huge gaps. They prevent a truly conclusive identification and, a full understanding of exactly what happened.
Absolutely. We're still left staring at those fundamental, really haunting questions. What actually killed this man? And why on earth was he found inside that steel cylinder?
Yeah.
And even with all the evidence pointing strongly to Thomas Cregan Williams, the lack of concrete proof means this stays firmly in the realm of unsolved mysteries.
It does. A Victorian-era puzzle discovered after a World War II bombing.
When you think about those items, the diaries, the postcard, the ring, the railway note, all frozen in time around 1885, it's hard not to imagine a very personal, maybe very desperate story unfolding inside those confined metal walls.
Yeah. What were his last thoughts?
Exactly. So the question for you, the listener, is, considering those items, that timeline, the bankruptcy, what personal narrative do you imagine playing out in those final moments inside that cylinder? What might have been going through his mind in that enclosed space? It's a truly thought-provoking puzzle.